So this morning I wanted to do a quick tutorial and explain a little bit about how Ostrich emulation works and how you can tune Suzuki Swift GT's ECU using an Ostrich emulator. So I've developed, on the left-hand side, some of these I don't know what they do, but I found almost all of the tables that exist in the ECU's chip map. And so here I'm just dealing with fuel. For the Suzuki Swift GT, there is kind of this magic timing map that was developed a long time ago by somebody's tuner, and it's in a lot of different chips. And so I found that even with lots of dyno time and on lots of different builds, high compression, low compression, cams, no cams, the same timing map pretty much makes the most power, which is really convenient. It makes it a little easier. And more than that, one of the reasons that these cars really like chip tunes is that fueling makes a difference, but not that much difference. And so I'm anal retentive. I like my AFRs to do what I want them to do. And I don't want to run my engine too lean, and I want to make the most power I can. So I have a friend who can do dyno tuning for the US equivalent of $25 an hour out in Trinidad. And so we have kind of a partnership, and that's where I've gotten my tune file that I'm going to sell to another friend because his build is similar. The main difference, however, is that he's running a North American market ECU for the car, and my friend in Trinidad has a European market or other market ECU, and the difference between the two, one will be an I2, is what it'll say on the cover, and the other would be an I3. The I3, those cars used a trim knob under the dash instead of an oxygen sensor. And what I found is that all of the ECUs have two fuel maps, but all the North American ECUs have two identical maps. They never switch between the two. They always hit the first one. The i3 computers with the trim knob hit the second fuel map when they're cold, and then the main fuel map later on. And I'm not even really sure how all that works. Long story short is that the code from that i3 can run on an i2 or i6 North American computer, and it solves a bug. Right now, this is a good example, if you can see it, of the car running at stoichiometric. Every once in a while it runs a little richer or a little leaner, but it's oscillating back and forth across the middle. And the reason that it's doing that is that my wideband is pretending to be its normal narrowband sender sensor, and it's sending a emulated narrowband signal to the ECU, and the ECU is doing what it normally does, which is at idle, and most of the time when you're cruising, if you have a small throttle angle, the car just tunes in closed loop and tries to make exactly stoichiometric at 14.7. The advantage of this code, however, is that it will do the same thing, and it is currently using the oxygen sensor, but it's seeing that oxygen sensor as if it were the trim knob. It just happens to be an automatic trim knob that's always correct. And so now, if I want to tune the idle differently, I can see where it's set, and I can actually disconnect the oxygen sensor, because it's coming from the signal is actually coming from in here, and you're going to watch that change behavior. Now see how it instantly began to run a little richer, a good bit richer in fact, and is no longer oscillating out at stoichiometric. It's just wandering around a little bit. It's just not even perfectly.
Now it's running lean.
Yeah, now it's running a little lean, which is pretty funny. So I'm going to try and richen this up just a little bit, and we'll show you how it works. And I'm going to, just to make sure everything is happy, I'm going to give it a little gas and let it kind of gradually come back down to idle. And so this is where Ostrich emulation comes into play. So we are actually tuning, and it took me forever. Sometimes people don't know what's going on. So first of all, you got to see down here whether it actually sees your Ostrich. Good deal. It sees your Ostrich. And the second thing is we want to be able to turn on address tracing so we can see where the ECU is actually hitting on the chip. Now I'll have to go and see whether it's really possible to see what's going on. I'm sure you're getting the lines as the screen refreshes on the video, but this computer unfortunately is too wimpy to do screen capture, but it will highlight the yellow cells that it's looking at. So right here, it's hiding these 4 cells are typically the idle in this particular map. So and right now I have values of 153, 155, 154. And it's idling really close to stoichiometric, actually. It almost looks like it's still using the oxygen sensor when it stabilizes. In fact, now it kind of looks exactly like it's using the oxygen sensor, but I know that it's not because I've unplugged it. So what I can do right now, and I'm going to try and do, is I'm going to try and cause this value to richen up a little bit, because my customer, basically, long story short, is the tuner who did the dyno tune did not really tune the idle. He tuned everything else. Wide open throttle is beautiful. I know wide open throttle is going to work great for my customer. Also, probably he'll be fine leaving his oxygen sensor connected, but sometimes big lumpy cams like a little extra fuel. And while I wish I could tune his ECU in person, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is make sure that if he does have problems in closed loop getting his car to idle correctly, that I've given him just a little bit more fuel to work with. It's a race car, it's not going to be spending a lot of time idling. I want it to idle when it needs to. So I'm going to just richen up this idle substantially beyond mine till about at least 13.0 AFR, maybe even a little richer. I don't want to get it too rich because, well, anyway, we don't really want to be dumping fuel down the pipe at idle, but it's a good way to just show how this works. So first you turn on address tracing so that you know where the ECU is looking, and it's a little complicated because you'd think it would just sit in one spot, but it never does. It's always looking at four cells together and taking the average of that value. And these values are actually time the injectors are open. I don't know if they're actually in milliseconds or there's some conversion. I have no idea, but that's roughly what they're supposed to be. And then on this side you have RPM. So between 700 and 950 RPM, it's just oscillating right around there, and you're going to need to edit all four of these values. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this little chip button, and it will turn green to say it's emulating. So that doesn't mean that these values will just instantly be updated in real time, but I can go change them. Let's start by changing all of these to about 10 points to 160. I'm going to just change them all to 165 roughly. And actually, I think the bottom two can be a little leaner. I'm going to put this at 165, and then we'll do how about just 162, 161. And we might smooth this out a little bit. I'll show you how I can look at this in a graph. And now we're going to hit save. Yeah, so commit changes and upload is going to be, I believe, the button we want to hit. And that should relatively instantly have an effect on our AFR. Let's see how that works. Oh yeah, look at that. So eventually, it instantly richened that up just a little bit. Maybe not as much as we wanted, and it takes pretty big changes to get exactly what you want. But we're definitely sitting on the rich side of stoichiometric now, so maybe I'll richen that up just a little bit more, get it down to 13.5, 13.3. Again, this particular ECU, you're not gonna get the steady numbers maybe that you really want sometimes, but you just have to try and get it close. Thankfully, the engine doesn't seem to care. Wide open throttle, by the way, you want about between 12 and 12.5, which is a little counterintuitive. Most people think you're going to be making power between 12.5 and 13, but these engines like it a little rich. So let's do let's go all the way up to 171. 171. We'll keep this at like 168, 165. Let's try that, just for giggles. So now we're going to commit and upload and see what happens. And we got a little richer. Not very much richer. I'm going to see if the computer will settle in a little bit with its new values if I give a little bit of extra gas. And you can see what happens. It's worthwhile to show you how this is all working. And when you hit the gas, it's going to shoot over, because this across the top is load as measured by the MAF. So when you open the throttle, all of a sudden you suck in a bunch of air and you start hitting those values on the far side. And I think basically I'm starting to be happy with what I'm seeing here, in that it's richened up a little, but I don't even want to make it too rich. I don't want it to be too crazy. I think these bottom two values also need to be richened up a little bit. I think at the top is kind of appropriate, and this just needs to also be in that same ballpark. So And then, after I get this done, I'm going to show you how to edit some things in a different way. Because when you make changes, generally what you're identifying is that there's a real curve somewhere, and instead of making odd peaks in your tune, you're going to want to smooth things out. So it is running a little richer. I'd like it to run a little richer yet at idle, and I'm a little surprised that I'm not. That might be enough though, because it's pretty rich value, and just knowing what I know, that might be exactly what my customer needs. At very least, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to run him lean, which is the main thing that I want to avoid. So I'm going to, I guess I'm going to wrap this up. This is probably good enough for now. I'm going to try shutting the whole car off. I'm going to make sure. I guess the second thing I'll do is I'll show you what I was going to talk about tuning with. This is a lot easier with a mouse, but you can tip the map like this. You can see that you can see which cell I've got highlighted there, and you can actually, and it's not really the one that I want to tune, right? So these are the 4 idle cells. You can see where they are. Let's get our fuel map back up. And so this is where I want to kind of even it out. I've made a big peak here, and so these maybe need to be slightly richer. Let's go, and you can actually click and drag to increase that tune. And I think I want to leave that as a little plateau there, but I can also bring, it is likely that this value should go up a little bit, and this value should go up a little bit, and then you can hear it making little beep noises to acknowledge that I've tuned it some. I'm trying to get it to rotate a little bit so I can grab some of the other cells. And for reference, this is another thing. I've got this flipped around so it's easier to see. But again, you've got the RPM axis down here. So this is as you're increasing RPM, and this is your increasing load, which is a little counterintuitive. This peak does not actually occur at wide open throttle. The wide open throttle is along this edge of the graph. So if you're actually out driving, when you watch the cells in there turn yellow, you're going to see that what happens is there's, depending on conditions, the yellow cells where the ECU hits cross across this hump, which is kind of your like throttle enrichment on tip-in, and then once for sustained wide open throttle, they end up over on this side. And so this is the most critical part of the tune over here, and right in the middle here is sort of your daily driving, and it really doesn't hit this very often because usually you would want to use the oxygen sensor in closed loop, but if you don't have that turned on, that's what you want it to hit. And some of these other parts it never really sees because it's throttle overrun, and so it actually cuts all fuel at throttle overrun. But if you make this pretty rich, you can get some nice crackles and pops when you're not all the way off the throttle, and it's kind of fun. So let's just richen this up slightly more yet. Maybe make this a little bit less of a steep slope down here in the graph. And then I'm going to grab some of the nearby cells. I'm going to guess that they really, if we want this to work well, we can't just tune the idle. It's that idle needs to be part of a surface. And so I think that's probably good, and I'm going to call that good. We'll commit those changes. All right, so we're just going to say save and commit. We'll watch that our AFRs change again, and of course they don't really seem to have changed that much. They did a little bit, and I'm comfortable with that. You can see it takes a pretty big change to get the effect that you want, but also I feel like the ECU is a little sticky, and it seems to remember, even though it has no capacity to do that, it's in theory, it seems to remember a little bit what it's doing. So I'm going to go ahead and save the whole business, shut off tracing, shut off emulation, and shut down the car. We'll try and starting it back up, make sure it starts like we want it to. It isn't, because of whatever's wrong with my car that I can't seem to tune out. It needs the gas pumped. and we'll see what our wideband tells us. I think it'll probably end up being a little richer still after we shut the car off and put it back on. Maybe not, but it's consistently running richer than Stoich. That's what we want. I'm going to leave it. I'm happy. This is what I'm going to ship the customer. If it ends up being too rich or off for him, I'm a pretty good dude to work with, and I'll fix it. Or hopefully it will work for him to simply be running in closed loop, and he has the option for that. You'll notice this with this the way that this tune is, you do not get a check engine light. So that's a good thing. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up. Maybe my kids have been watching and been really good this whole time. You're going to say hi?
Dad? Hi.
Hi. And then Arthur, that's Bill, that's my oldest, and this is Arthur. You going to say hi?
Hi.
Hi. Okay, thanks very much.